Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for Triennial Conversations. And I welcome to our audiences joining us on the live stream. My name is Simone Liamon. I'm the Hugh Williamson Curator of Contemporary Design and Architecture here at the NGV. And before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land on which we are gathered here in Melbourne, the Wurundjeri and the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respect to their elders past, present and future. I'd also like to acknowledge that our guests present in today's talk reside on the lands of their respective traditional custodians and pay respect to those communities as well. Now, regretfully, our moderator, Damien Cave from the New York Times, is unable to join us here today as he has travelled from Sydney, where in recent hours further COVID-19 cases have been detected. And so we are following the guidelines provided by the Department of Health. Our thoughts are with Damien, and we wish him and everyone the very best of health. Now, the New York Times is a proud presenting partner of the Triennial Conversations, which marks the opening weekend of the NGV Triennial, providing insight into the exhibition through the perspectives of local and international curators, artists, domain experts and academics. This series of 8 conversations will appear on the platform of the New York Times following the event. And in this 4th conversation, titled Resonant Nature, we will discuss the relationship between technology and the natural environment. We aim to explore what this relationship looks like. And as we accelerate towards a future where advanced technology has the potential to change everything, we ask the question, how will technology and nature coexist? And indeed, how might our world change? Now, joining us to explore this topic is Tessa Laird and Refik Anadol. Tessa is a writer, artist and lecturer in critical and theoretical studies at Victorian College for the Arts in the School of Art. A critic for numerous publications, Tessa is editor of Art in Australia Online. Her speculative inquiry into colour, A Rainbow Reader, was published in 2013, and her book, Bat, for UK publishing house Recton's Animal Series, exploring the historical significance and impact of animals on humans, was released in 2018. Now, commissioned by NGV for the Triennial publication, Tessa's marvellous essay, Beastly Beauty, Ecological Entanglement via Colour Separation, responds to the Milan-based design studio Karnofsky and their work appearing in the Triennial. Titled Extinctions, Karnofsky has transformed a section of the NGV's British and European galleries with a stunning immersive RGB wallpaper installation in which insects and animals are illustrated and illuminated in either red, green or blue ink based on their threat level from extinct to of least concern. Welcome, Tessa.
Thank you.
And now joining us from Los Angeles via live stream is Refik Anadol. Working at the frontier of art and technology, Refik creates artwork that locates creativity at the intersection of humans and machines. Commissioned by the NGV, Refik Anadol's extraordinary new work for the Triennial, Quantum Memories, is presented centre stage in Federation Court. His most technically And conceptually ambitious work to date, Quantum Memories plunges us deep into the world of big data, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and quantum to show us nature, but not as we know it. Using more than 200 million nature-related images harnessed from the internet, Anadol's immersive real-time video offers us a new radical vision of nature, encouraging us to rethink our relationship with the natural world, perhaps when the neural network of the computerised mind is enabled. And welcome, Rafiq. Give us a wave. Hey! Now, before we kick off the conversation, I'd like to cue Rafiq's work so we can indeed look at Quantum Memories on the screen. And while that's playing in the background, I think we might make the most of the time, Tessa, and kick off the conversation.
Sure.
And Rafiq, I know that you can hear me. So I wish to start with a really, really easy question, but I have a feeling it's more of a provocation. I wish to propose that at our core, humans are a technological species, and that we've always been this way. But I'm wondering, do you think we've arrived at a point where we need to critically examine our impetus to invent, innovate, and deploy technology because humanity, quite broadly, has lost its way? Have we lost our way spiritually, politically, and even on an economic front, to a point where we are not driving technology in a responsible way in view of the natural world? So Tessa, this is a really easy question. I know that you can answer this really.
Thank you, Simone. Okay, so there's so many elements to that, and I guess the first thing I would say is that I think, and we've talked about this, the distinction between human, nature, technology, they're all kind of arbitrary distinctions anyway. And obviously, we're part of nature, nature's part of us, and nature involves technological innovation. Animals do it, we do it. We're on a spectrum of technological agency and capability. So there's that, and there's also the fact that I suppose you talked about humanity broadly, and I suppose that's a way of saying the Western kind of colonial, capitalist, white, etc. World that has been kind of taking the reins for quite a while now. So when you say, have we reached a tipping point, I suppose I would say maybe the tipping point came a while ago. We're still kind of figuring out what the fallout of that is, and it's kind of on this crazy trajectory, but when it actually started, I don't know. So I guess there's no time like the present to kind of recalibrate, to say, okay, what has been going wrong, what is going wrong, and what could go wrong. But also, I mean, I'm not a complete sort of doomsayer. I think that there's also a lot we have to celebrate and a lot we have to think about in terms of our relationship to nature, for want of a better word, because a lot of cultures don't have a separate word for nature, because it would be a ridiculous thing to think of, oh, that's this thing that exists outside of us. We are enmeshed with it on every level. And so I think the more that we come to appreciate that, the less we will damage it, and the less we will kind of put our needs before the needs of a kind of a broader ecology.
Rafiq, I'm going to perhaps take it a step further and ask you, do you think the prevalence of technology is fostering meaningful connections with our environment, or indeed do you think that it is moving in a direction where we have cause to pause and reflect? Rafiq, we might just ask you to pause there for a moment while we sort out your audio. We're just having a little trouble hearing you. Okay, Tessa, I think while we're waiting for Rafiq to connect, do you think the prevalence of technology... Oh, here. Hi. Rafiq, would you like me to repeat the question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So,
Wonderful.
Rafiq, the prevalence of technology, do you think that it's sort of generating more meaningful connections with technology, or no, with the environment, or do you think that it's leading to a position where we do need to pause and reflect?
So I think we are constantly creating systems and technologies that are creating a new ecosystems with or without control. But I think I want to remember one of my heroes, Philip K. Dick, and I think he was saying something very inspiring about this thing. And I want to read very quickly because I think it's a very relevant context. He says, reality is that which doesn't go away when you stop believing in it. A simulation is that which doesn't stop when the stories go away. Stories are responsible to our human desire for resolution, but a simulation is responsible only to its own laws and initializing conditions. A simulation has no moral, prejudice, or meaning. Like nature, it just is. So I think he said something incredibly on point back in many, many decades ago. And I think we are in a kind of a simulation of ideas and trying to execute our dreams and imaginations and reflecting as humanity many things. But I don't think we always have a same sensitivity when we invent an idea, a technology, or a system. I think we find out later in the journey. And I think one of the answers to your question, I guess, since we are constantly generating our own simulations of ideas, thoughts, emotions, memories, and dreams, eventually this disconnection happens in a natural way. But I think, as humanity, we fail purposefully, hopefully, so we connect again by failing again. I mean, very like a single bucket kind of context, fail again, fail better. And sometimes nature doesn't have the tolerance, right? Because when this is something that can go in a very, very wrong way. So if you look at the data, which is, I think we have to, right? It's a new common language of humanity, better than sometimes mathematics. It just clearly says that every like and comments and shares of humanity in social media in just 14 years later, so 10 years later, will be the 14% of entire electric usage of the humanity. So our egocentric actions are eventually creating a problem with or without knowing. So how to bring awareness to this? I think that's Triennial is just there. And that's what we are doing here at the moment. It's a very meta context.
Yeah. Now, Rafiq, I have a feeling we could get deep very quickly, and it often does, the conversations that we have. But you've just alerted me to a conversation that we had a while ago where we were talking about humans' experience has always been mediated to a degree by technology. In a sense, if we understand that we are a technological species and we see things that we invent, environments that we create, sort of allow us to experience a version of the environment, a version of the world that we wish to see, some would say that we've never truly experienced nature in the absence of technology.
That's actually very irrelevant. I mean, while we are intelligent living beings that explore ideas, but what I think I was trying to say is, if we apply simulation model with the help of technology, perhaps before we do a wrong action for nature, perhaps we can use machines or intelligent these things to just at least understand what may go wrong. So kind of using prediction engines to predict what may go wrong as like a model of, I think, thinking.
Sure.
And I think that can be one way of imagining why technology is always required for humanity. I mean, it's always, we generate tools to survive, to like connect, to create culture, to heal, to rituals, and I mean many things, right? In humanity, every single action we have always had some technology in it.
Sure. So before we go into many worlds theory and we start unpacking the concept of the simulation further, Refik, what benefits do you think humans derive from our relationship with nature? I mean, why is it an enduring topic? It's the topic of your work, Quantum Memories. What do you think at the core this relationship speaks of?
I think it's a very, fundamental, evolutionary, DNA, gene, memory of humanity, I think nature is. So we accept or not, but the science clearly, accept this reality of where we are coming from as much as possible, right? And it clearly indicates that the nature is what we will need, right? Without light, without water, without like certain ecosystem and ecological connections with us, we will not survive. We will not be here. So, knowing this very clearly, and also knowing that science really explores what is nature is, and I clearly just naturally, I guess, connected with the concept of nature. And I think when you think about water, right, we are made of waters. When we think about light, photons and wavelengths, but at the same time, without light, we cannot survive. If there's no sun, right, how many years can we survive? Very fundamentally, our ecological existence in this reality is already based on the natures and its fluctuation and perfection. So the more we mess it up, the more we have the chance of being distinct. And I think that even itself is a big inspiration and a motivation to imagine.
Yeah. Refik, I'm going to segue back to Tessa because I want to tease out some of the ideas in the Karnofsky project. Now, Karnofsky's work use colour and the manipulation of sight to really draw that interconnection between all life on the planet and the precarious existence in the present world, and how perhaps human activity is making it increasingly more inhospitable to species where we see climate change and we see species extinction at an alarming rate. So, do you think we are becoming increasingly alienated from nature and the natural environment through technology, or do you see this as just sort of an evolutionary chapter in the history of humanity, and unfortunately other species are the collateral damage?
Oh God, that's a terrible way of thinking.
It's a terrible way of thinking about it, but do you...
I guess, one of the things I just sort of thought, there's a relationship between what Refik was just saying when he was talking about Philip K. Dick, and I think about, one of his most famous works, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which got turned into Blade Runner, is all about a world in which there are no animals anymore, and they're just, they're fabricated, they're simulated. And Karnofsky's work is all about animal extinction. And so I sort of think in that very dystopian way, it's possible we are going to see more and more, we are seeing more and more extinctions, and that's not, I think, I don't think that we can say that, that's just how it goes because they die off anyway, and it's just a shame that in our kind of use of the planet or abuse of the planet that this collateral damage happened. I don't think we can in all good conscience, kind of allow that to happen. So yeah, I guess, I don't know, I feel this
Do you think one of the biggest issues is sort of how humanity has perhaps come to see itself as presiding over nature? I mean, you answered the first question talking about how we are of nature, we are part of it, but do you think, you know, certainly over the 20th century, we've arrived at a point where, for all intents and purposes, we act, do, we conduct commerce, so much of our activity in or through a way that sort of suggests we think we preside over the natural world.
Well, I think a couple of issues. One of the ones that I wanted to refer back to Rafik's talk about simulation, and I suppose that I don't have anything against simulation, and I feel like in the best possible world we have all these kinds of simulations, creativity, we have technology and everything, but it's not at the expense of the natural world, for want of a better term, so that every simulation has to be examined in terms of what are its real world impacts. For example, how much fossil fuels is it burning to run, and how many minerals is it digging out of the ground to be constructed or fabricated. And then, you know, with algorithmic machine learning, where's the labor coming from to teach the machine, which is alluded to in the essay about Rafik's work, which is really interesting to think about. We sort of imagine these things are happening all by themselves behind the screen, but they're happening outsourced in different countries, and we know the cloud is burning fossil fuels all the time. When you're streaming Netflix, when you're streaming Spotify, you're burning carbon that you wouldn't have been if you were just listening to the radio, watching TV, or watching a rented DVD. So there's all these kinds of things that we are doing more and more of without the technology behind it is kind of invisibilizing the actual effects, the real world effects. So I suppose all of those things, I think, need to be thought through simultaneously with the kind of technological advances that are going to happen anyway. And I think it's probably a good thing that artists get involved with these technological advances rather than stay separate from them, because artists are creative and also often quite involved in social justice and environmental movements, and so maybe they can bring a bit of that with them. And also artists work at the interface with the public, so there's a way in which artworks can kind of bring these ideas to the fore. So I know that we can't stop it from happening. I don't want to be the Luddite throwing my shoes into the weaving loom and saying, you know, because it's going to happen. But at the same time, I think we have to be incredibly aware of the ethics and the real environmental costs of these new technologies.
So Rafik, we're going to segue back to you. So, you know, you are using artificial intelligence and next generation computing. You are embarking on a journey, and Quantum Memories is your first realised work that embraces quantum software. But can you talk a little bit about what you were striving for with the work? I mean, it is a hypnotic, compelling visual experience, but what were you ultimately striving for with the work? And can you just explain a little bit about the data from which it's been generated?
Yes, so I think very early beginnings of my experiment with computation really started while I was 8 years old. Like, start very humbly by playing games, and but addicted to games, clinically addicted to games, in a way that I love that there's a space in the mind of a machine. So that idea grew up over the years, learn about programming languages, and then understand what is data means. And I learned that data actually is not just numbers, but they're actually memories of humanity. And eventually I close a circle by applying AI in my practice 4 years ago in a residency at Google. So 2016, I think I really understand that machines can learn, but the question was, can they dream? And when you ask that question, of course, machines do not decide yet, but the tools that is developed over the years is technically can simulate the moment of dreaming and hallucinating from the perspective of a machine. And then I learned that actually when we detach ego from data, there's a high chance of understanding things beyond just privacy or the problem of free will. For example, what is our collective memories? Can we use our collective memories to generate our collective dreams or understand them much better? And eventually in my last 4 years of journey, I really inspired by the archives, where I believe humanity is very divine architectural locations where information turns into a knowledge, eventually turns into a wisdom. But then I learned that actually we have other archives, which is social media. I mean, with or without knowing, we drop our collective memories by hashtag, by telling what it is. Sometimes we are in it, sometimes we are becoming the perspective of that, memory. And I look at the machines that are in the space, looks for unknown for us, right? Hubble, ISS, or even the, our selfie, Earth of ISS to Hubble and the Mars surface as well. But what was really triggered me more than ever, especially in pandemic, the feeling of sense of displacement. So we are not traveling anywhere, many of us at the moment, and we are constantly simulating and imagining and dreaming locations we cannot perceive by physical world. Then it triggered to me, I think a year ago, why not the focus of collective memories of nature to simulate from the machine's perspective? There is a high chance, if we are not careful about what to do with nature, these may be our lost memories. And these may be our lost memories saved in social media, where who knows how to recover in anthropological and archaeological way. So I thought perhaps if we look at this information through the lens of machine intelligence, perhaps we can find the patterns of collective memories and eventual dreams. And thanks to this last year, maybe people aware of it, the quantum computing is one of the most fundamental and important leap for humanity's problems. This can not only just boringly can be used for password hacking, it can be used for protein folding and chemistry and biology and things that couldn't be cured for certain reasons. And quantum computation can be kind of a very important next decade's importance for humanity, and even like reducing the cost of energy and many others. And I start working with systems that are extremely, for example, careful to nature, first of all, just starting before that. As a studio, we are extremely careful about what kind of services we use, who are behind them, what is our carbon offset, and how can we do that. So we are not just randomly dumping data and doing things because of certain ambitious. But beyond that, this is a more easy part, by the way. I think many people can now do that and understand their carbon offset and all these things. But the question was really, how can we use the cutting edge technology at the moment, which is quantum computing? And thanks to the Google AI team at Quantum, I have a very wonderful email came from Alan Ho, one of the wonderful mind behind the research as well. And they were looking for also collaborations and speculations. And I was also very looking forward to, for this project that we collaborated for NGV, for this commission, what can be the next iteration of imagination in the age of machine intelligence? So simply all this very naturally collide. And I thought, if quantum computing, one of the world's most complex thinking and one of the most advanced thinking with computation, you are imagining things in subatomic level. So minus 2073 degrees, like everything is extremely sensitive to everything, and you are trying to achieve some kind of a supremacy of perfection in a world that is extremely sensitive. So it's not that different from our nature, right? When we mess up something, when a species have a problem, when we have a wrong usage of some certain technology, we do the same thing for nature. Nature is as sensitive as quantum computing, maybe more than, of course. But then I said, perhaps we have a chance here to speculate a concept. which is inspired from the Hugh Everett's many world interpretation, in quantum mechanics, in quantum computation also, when you measure something, you have a chance to open up a whole new world. And that world, or universes, maybe many, many more. So it's still a scientific debate between many, many scientists. But the world cannot be perceived by human eye. It's not AR, it's not VR, it's not microscopic, it's subatomic universe. So it's pretty clear that humanity will not be able to perceive that universe very soon.
So, Refik,
Then I say, well,
Refik, may I interject? Because I think at this point, a lot of people are going to be heading to Wikipedia and putting in quantum, and they're needing to, which I hope people do. But I think what you're alluding to is this sort of concept of technological nature, because in a sense, what you are doing is simulating, interpreting, but producing nature of a technological order, which weirdly is trying to bring about the effect, the soothing, the healing effect of the experiences we have in the dimension that we presently understand to be nature. So where are the gains here? We understand that, the enormous complexity and the technology around the achievement, but where are the gains? Is it simply about trying to preserve these embodied experiences in the event that we muck everything up and we can't return to this world as we know it?
That can be one perspective, one projection, but what I want to say is we always make machines to go spaces we cannot go.
Okay.
Like, it's a very pattern of, humanity's natural quest. So what I am trying to say here, we need another machine for the next leap for humanity. And if one day we lose what we have at the moment, we will again need those machines to remember. So if we know these concepts very well, at the end, it's a vessel of imagination, a vessel of meditation, a vessel of reality at the end, that piece of experience. But what I want to say is, we will eventually need a smarter thing, an advanced thing, to really understand that universe. So here's a speculation now, what will happen if a machine looks for alternative realities for us by using scientific reality, not just pseudoscience. So that's the feeling of reality, but still applies artistic and aesthetic interpretation of a universe that may exist. So I think the feeling, of course, at the end is a sublime, an emotional, a very remembering the future feeling, I guess. A machine nostalgia, an AI nostalgia, like a machine remembers something for humans. But a feeling that is simulated in a way that clicks in our cognitive system in a way that have some similarities.
Yeah, sure.
It's a hard narrative, but I think it's some kind of an optimist moment of remembering, I guess I can say.
Refik, I'm going to move back to Tessa. Are you following this? But Tessa, sure. I want to refer, in your beautiful essay that you've written for the publication on the Karnofsky work, you say, how can we not be moved when we are reminded of the infinite diversity of the world we cohabit, when we are dumbstruck in awe of its majesty and also grief-stricken by its precarity, all the while being fully cognizant of our own role in this. We had a conversation before this panel about Elon Musk sending, this mission to colonise or mine Mars. And this idea of, perhaps we should be more mindful of how we are cohabitating Earth. But this notion of grief that you raise in your essay, I think, is extremely poignant, because we're here having a conversation about the potentiality of of losing the natural world and simulations. But where does that leave? Where does the grief leave humanity? Do we have to find other reasons, alternate reasons to exist if the one that we've always known disappears? I mean, I'm interested, at what point does, is artificial by nature, at what point does the whole concept of nature transform to a point where our relationships change?
I sort of think in what I'm hearing and what we're talking about, there's a lot of this sense of reinventing the wheel and having to find fixes for things that we've, screwed up. Whereas if we had paid attention first and we hadn't kind of been going down this trajectory of not paying attention, we wouldn't end up having to then simulate, fix, reinvent the wheel to be able to, for example, look after the natural world, which we've kind of abused.
Rafik's nodding in the background.
But I think it's interesting because Rafik was talking about this idea of AI being able to help us make decisions about how not to hurt the natural world or how to do things better. But it seems to me great, but we've already had those knowledges. Those knowledges still exist. There's plenty of Indigenous science that has been listening and knows the right way to do things. So why do we need all this tech to do something we've already known how to do for millennia? And so I feel like we're always kind of playing catch up with ourselves because we're always kind of inventing ways to screw things up, so that we need to then invent ways to kind of put them right again. And then in the invention of those ways, we're kind of already several steps down the track of ruining it all again. So I feel, this is just a way that, and when I say humanity, I don't mean all humanity. It's obvious that, not everyone's responsible in those same ways. But it seems that this is a process that we've witnessed happen, we're witnessing happen. And so now we're trying to think of ways to create healing, soothing algorithms rather than just going to the beach. And that it seems like busy work in a way, I think. And obviously art itself could also seem like busy work because, is there anything really better about looking at a painting than going and getting your hands dirty in the garden? But I'm not going to say that there's no point in art existence, because I think it is part of our creative expression. Technology is part of our creative expression too. And these things just need to be kind of constantly interrogated, and the ethics need to be kind of thought through as we go, as we continue to make and create. Yeah.
Sure. Now, Refik, you talk about how quantum computing has the potential to just transform the world as we know it, because you talk about how it can tackle computational problems that can sort of unlock solutions to some of the biggest issues that humanity is facing. We've spoken about climate change. Recently, we've been talking about looking at, trying to create solutions on a pharmaceutical level for the virus. You have this almost contagious belief and enthusiasm, passion for where advanced computing is going. But you are not a computer scientist. You are a new media artist, and you are producing, artworks for the public to experience. Can you tell us why you choose to work in this realm and not work at Google in the AI quantum team, working on algorithms that potentially might be deployed on some of these big, wicked problems?
Yeah. So first of all, I think I don't know what is the definition of art and design for you, but for me, art is humanity's capacity of imagination. And I found myself responsible to push this capacity to the end. And when I push myself, I found that there's technology. And when I push my imagination with technology, I eventually found computation, quantum computation there. So it was a very natural innovation and discovery, I can say, in a thought experiment. But I think what is really inspiring here is we are creating something bigger than us. We have something doesn't forget. We are constantly creating these systems and hardwares and softwares that decides where we go, what we eat, what we say, what we watch, what we buy, what we read. So it's, I think, inevitable to say that the systems are becoming more important than our, existential reasons. So while I heavily agree that we have the knowledge, but it doesn't, we have the information, doesn't mean it becomes knowledge. And even if it's a knowledge, doesn't mean it will become wisdom, right? So it's a very, fundamental humanity's basic problems. But I think these Google AI, which is in this case, by the way, in my practice, I always think the same thing. Like if I'm an artist that I would like to use a brush, I would like to dip it into the mind of a machine. Or when I think about these concepts that like a machine that can compute memories and dreams, I know these are very sci-fi or science fiction feeling things, but essentially they are not. Like they are really using the tools on the edge of technology.
But Refik, you do have a tendency to anthropomorphize technology or the machine, and so I find that really fascinating. I mean, you talk about memory, you talk about the mind. These are words that, yes, we do apply to computers, but do you think we have to be mindful of how we do project and anthropomorphize technology?
Because instead of making humans more machine, I think we should make machines more human, because the other one is much dangerous. I think the other one, I don't think will be ethically correct without understanding the other one, if there is any way of choosing in one of them. So I prefer to make machines more human, to understand who we are as well. And I think it's an interesting thought experiment through the lens of art and design, because you can find things that are maybe not exist in our human-to-human interactions. So there are some really interesting serendipity when you bring machine intelligence as a collaborator. And it may just bring things that cannot be computed or perceived or cognitively, executed in a human brain. So there's a powerful tool of imagination, a colleague, a friend in the team that can do things way different than your human friends. So I think I'm not trying to say, by the way, I'm very optimistic by technology, because I think ramifications are not enough for humanity to go to the next leap. Because I think the question is, what else can we do with it, is a bigger question than finding what is wrong. So to find that, what else can we do with that? It's eventually we need a machine to find that answer too. So we are in this, a funny vicious circle with the systems we've generated for humanity. So the reason, for example, when I collaborate with like Google AI team, for example, when you think with the people who invent the algorithms, like we had a fantastic dialogue with Alan, Murphy, and Michael. These are the people who run the experiments, the research scientists. When you understand fundamentally why they are looking for these patterns of information or the discoveries and innovations, there is a completely different universe in the mind of a scientist. And sometimes having an artist in the dialogue, bringing the questions from life sciences, also create a whole new symbiotic relationships. And I think the people who are generating our future, right? The people who are inventing the future, and when they compile their imagination with the other disciplines in the world, I think the serendipity in that campfire is incredible, if I can say. And that's, I think, what I found last now maybe 6 years. Microsoft, Intel, IBM, Google, NVIDIA, a very similar pattern of imagination. Like there's no boring logo movement or asking for like a cliche commercial thing. it's a pure fundamental question. It comes from the core of art. Like as John Maeda said, right? Design is a solution to a problem. Art is a question to a problem. So like when you put an artist, a shaman, an AI scientist in the same in the same room, you know, that catharsis and that moment, and the serendipity just fires up. And I think that's kind of imagination model for humanity, I think, is what is really creating some big leap than creating boring products.
But you boring products. You, but you just remind me. Often, you know, we talk about discursive design, critical design. We always say we have to remember, you know, that these designers are asking more questions and they are providing solutions. You know, we've got to a point, I think, both in, you know, in art and design, creatives are trying to contextually understand where is it best to deploy creativity. And a lot of the ground has shifted so much that we perhaps are asking more questions now than ever before. But Refik, I'm going to re-engage Tessa in the dialogue. Tessa, you write extensively about art from all around the world. Is that a trend that you're seeing at the moment? It's this one of trying to ask the questions rather than necessarily provide a point of view or a solution with any great certainty?
I suppose I think art's always done that, and I think one of the synergies between my essay and Refik's work was the use of this term superposition,
yes.
which is also was the name of the Sydney Biennale before Niren, and I think it's a term from quantum theory, which is this idea that things can be simultaneously true or coexist. So a 0 and a 1 could be a 0, 1, 1, 0 simultaneously. And, you know, the particle wave idea, the whole kind of, you know, Schrodinger's cat, is it alive, is it dead?
It's Refik's nodding away.
All of those things. And, and I feel like art sometimes does that too. I mean, it offers you multiple perspectives simultaneously. As a viewer, I'm often in this kind of very ambivalent state, and I don't mean that in a kind of a negative sense. I sort of feel that ambivalence it's not the same as being a fence sitter or being kind of lackadaisical. It can often be that you're actually really passionately engaged, but you sort of you can hold these simultaneous worldviews in your head, and you don't want to kind of reduce it down to one or the other. So I guess, that's what I would say art can do. But I think maybe, as with everything, there can be a downside to that when it does lead to, say, potential for hypocrisy or potential for fence sitting and not kind of actually engaging with the world. So,
It actually reminds me of Arturo Escobar's not many world theories. It's a play on many world theories, but looking at world-making theories. This idea that on the planet today we have people live many worlds or are living out many different worlds, and how do we get to a point where we can conceive of a world where equality and I guess a way of constructing a world together, but through the lens of these many worlds. We see it a lot in sort of critical design at the moment. It's trying to address a lot of the foibles of the 20th century, trying to see things that have been concealed for so long and express them in production that can be put to work in both commercial and in an altruistic sense. So to do good. So this new concept of doing good, which is a departure from good design of the 20th century. But I digress. But Arturo Escobar is very interesting, the writing in this area. Okay. Rafiq, I'm going to ask you perhaps one last question. A new media artist. This is a term, I guess, that, you know, we're no stranger to it. It's a term that's been used for a good couple of decades now. But what does it mean to be a new media artist in the 21st century? I mean, unless you're embracing quantum and artificial intelligence, you know, are you behind? What do you see happening in the area today?
So I think the term of new is still very bothering me, because when we use the new in front of something, we put a linear experience. And I think the field is extremely a non-linear fashion of imagination. But what I'm feeling is, I mean, it's a very maybe philosophical, I mean, I feel very much connected to Kierkegaard. He says, life can only be understood backwards, right? But it must be lived forwards. So I think conceptually having the media arts as a mean of, I mean, first of all, as McLuhan said, when we put the first satellite in the orbit, right, the whole humanity's evolution completely changed because we start to become interconnected species. And I think from there to now, any media that is basically generated by anything that we can perceive becomes a material for a media artist. And I think by the way, got my degree from design media arts, which is a much different speculation, also applies design thinking and methodologies in the arts, which creates some interesting dialogue between the systems, the ideas, and also imagination models of, I mean, any form. So I think there's a kind of a freedom of imagination there when you really go beyond these titles and, you know, I mean, because of the problems of titleizing for humanities, they are so much constrained and so much borders in their own reality, right? But for example, in our studio, we have a model, by the way. So we are 14 people, can speak 14 languages, 25 median age, and pretty much everyone can code. We really don't have any title in some moments. Like, and half an hour, I'm a neuroscientist, half an hour, I'm a quantum scientist, and half an hour, an AI scientist, a painter, and like a philosopher. It's just a beautiful imagination of respectfully to the field of what you research, because the concept of learning to learn, I think, really helps a lot. So I think a new model of media arts is really becoming this learning to learn concept. So it really like creates a whole new, you know, relationship with the life. And I'm seeing this pattern a lot with my colleagues and in my mentors, in my professors as well. So there's a major hope here when you start to like deconstruct these borders of, you know, identities and, you know, the clusters of information in only focus to some certain people. And there I think there's this beautiful democratic imagination of life. And I think the new media arts or design, I believe, will be much more inspired by these techniques, because I think it's becoming much more universal in any scale. So I'm just trying to experiment with these ideas, at least humbly in my own reality.
Fantastic. So I do believe we've reached time. So Rafiq, thank you so much for joining us from LA. Congratulations on your work appearing in the NGV Triennial. It is sensational. Tessa, congratulations on your essay in the Triennial publication. Please thank Rafiq Anadol and Tessa Laird. Thank you.